The POCO F2 Pro is one of those 2020 flagships that's in a pretty weird position. So, of course, with the rush for 5G, we've had issues where companies are no longer necessarily able to push for that flagship killer device of the year. So, for example, dating back even to the OnePlus 3, going into last year, the year before, the Pocophone F1, all of these phones kind of thrived off of that whole flagship killer thing that we can't really get at the moment. You'll see even with the Realme X50 that just launched, that's launched for £299, but of course it doesn't have a Snapdragon 865. And that's kind of the same issue that we've got here, where we've got a Snapdragon 865, but we've had other corners cut as a result of needing to kind of push down the price because 5G is expensive. While we've got this 64 megapixel camera, we've got a pop-up camera as well, as you can see there, and that's really the extent of, I guess, the fancy features. It's a 64Hz display, there's 180Hz touch sampling rate, so, you know, I mean, like, that's good for low latency kind of touching and scrolling and what have you, but you won't actually see more frames per second. It's still only 60Hz. Likewise, then, it's only 1080p panel. There's 30-watt fast charging in the box, which is pretty good. You get that charger, but there's no wireless charging. And it's all of these kind of cutbacks and... Not even cutbacks. It's all of these just kind of straight out the box kind of nothing fancy, no bells and whistles experience that you'll get with the POCO F2 Pro. So even with this device, there's no dual speakers. The single firing speaker is pretty good. There's an in-display fingerprint sensor, and again, there's nothing fancy out of it, you know? There's a headphone jack in the device though, and it works. I've tested it. I don't like the position of it. It's up the top, so when you're putting your phone in your pocket, you've got to put it top down or top up, because obviously then if you have your headphones plugged into it or whatever. But I mean, at this point, I think we kind of just have to follow the phrase of beggars can't be choosers. The fact there's a flagship device releasing in 2020 with a headphone jack is surprising in and of itself. So obviously we would hope then that Poco, or I guess Xiaomi, because as I said, this is just a Redmi K30 Pro. This device is already out. But anyway, there's nothing hugely special about it, and the fact that that headphone jack is even there is one of the crazier parts. And there's the side power button, which is red. I have the neon blue variant. The red stands out. It doesn't look too nice. I mean, I guess it makes it easier to find, but again, you'll kind of get a feel for where the power button is on your phone very quickly, so I don't really see the need for kind of having that. Now obviously on this phone you've got the 64 megapixel camera sensor, which is the primary sensor, and I don't really find myself using any other sensors on this device. There's a macro camera which is actually very, very good. It's a 5 megapixel. Most phones that I've seen only have a 2 megapixel. Then there's a wide angle, and then there's a depth sensor. I'm showing you a number of photos on the screen at the moment that I have taken. I went on a little staycation because, you know, COVID-19 and all that, to a city in Ireland known as Waterford. And I took lots of photos while I was down there. I used it as my primary smartphone camera, and it did very well. It was probably one of the better phones I've used in terms of cameras. I mean, I've used like the OnePlus 8 Pro, I've used the Honor 20 Pro. It beats those devices and or is on par with them. I use the Nightscape mode sparingly. I don't really find myself using those modes on phones too much because sometimes I find it can be unnatural. Often you get like a mini night mode when you're just taking a photo in darkness with the flash off, where it takes longer to take the photo, but it doesn't kind of over brighten it to the point that it looks weird, which I found this phone would sometimes do. Not a big deal, just kind of something to look out for, I guess. There's only the single front-facing camera, which, I mean, very few phones have more than one. The Realme X50 Pro comes to mind, which has a wide-angle camera as the second one, but people didn't like that, obviously, because then you've got a massive cutout on the screen. So, and I mean, this is only a pop-up camera. One of the things I don't like with this pop-up camera, though, is the fact that when you are on the lock screen and you go to swipe to unlock it, you cannot just press that power button and have the pop-up camera come up straight away. You need to swipe to go to where you put in your PIN or your pattern or your password, and then it will scan for your face, as opposed to the likes of, say, the OnePlus 7 series, which what it did was when you turned on the screen, the camera immediately popped up. I assume this is done for wear and tear reasons, but it's still just annoying, especially when other devices on the market have already kind of not solved that issue, but kind of just skirted around it. But yeah, in terms of performance, the POCO F2 Pro kind of confused me. So, I mean, using it is fine. There's no issues, gaming is fine. I was able to emulate games such as The Simpsons Hit and Run from the GameCube, a childhood favourite of mine. But when I tried to do a stress test, POCO whole thing with this phone, their thing has been that it's a cool phone. It doesn't overheat, and it doesn't. I mean, like, it's a normal temperature all the time, even when gaming. But I think how POCO has partially achieved this is actually because they are throttling it pretty heavily. I did a review over on the XDA news portal, which you can check out. I've got that up here beside me. I'm kind of just looking at it occasionally. And what they did was they throttled the CPU very heavily after 10 minutes. And I did a comparison with it with the OnePlus 8 Pro, and it didn't throttle, like, at all. It throttled to 95% of its total capacity, while the POCO F2 Pro did it in between 70 and 80, depending on the certain situation you were in. Again, not really noticeable, but something to keep in mind if you're kind of doing intensive tasks on your smartphone. Generally speaking, I mean, when I'm away or whatever, I can often end up using my smartphone as a replacement for a laptop, because I reply to a lot of work emails, messages, all that kind of thing. And when I'm using my device, I need it to, number one, last, and I need the performance to be good. However, this is where the POCO F2 Pro really shines, is the battery life. I took this with me. I didn't get to charge it at night after using it for a day, and then it lasted me until halfway through the next day before it died. Now keep in mind, I'm using this extremely heavily. I'm using Snapchat, Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, Gmail, Slack, Discord, all of these things, and it lasted. I mean, like, it handled all of it. And that really impressed me, because I've never had a phone capable of that. The OnePlus 8 Pro dies on me by the evening. The Realme X50 Pro did the same. While this phone, I managed to get between 8 and 10 hours of screen on time. While that is obviously not the norm for most smartphones. If you need something with a big battery life, yeah, this will do it. I did the PC benchmark test, and on maximum brightness, no airplane mode, it reached 8 hours of screen on time. Now what that does is it goes and basically continuously processes data so that it would kind of synthetically reproduce you using your phone constantly. And I got 8 hours 10 minutes of the screen being on. When I did it at the ultimate minimum, so lowest screen brightness, airplane mode on, I got 22 hours. For contrast, the Realme X50 Pro got 5 hours with brightness maximum, and 10 hours with brightness on low, airplane mode on. So obviously this is already in a lot better of a position than those devices like the Realme X50 Pro and the OnePlus 8 Pro. I've never had a phone battery last this long, even when I've reviewed mid-range devices, which often can have either bigger batteries or lower end chipsets, so then as a result it uses less power. Overall, the POCO F2 Pro is pretty decent. I mean, yes, it's a cheap flagship, but I can't really see anything else on the market that can even compare. You would be spending upwards of €100 more to get a Realme X50 Pro, which is possibly the closest thing to it. You get 65 watt charging and a 90Hz screen with that. which is actually only €20 more than the high-end POCO F2 Pro. The POCO F2 Pro comes in at €499 for the 6GB of RAM, 128GB of storage variant, while the 8GB of RAM, 256GB of storage variant comes in at $599, which is the exact same price as the Realme X50 Pro. Currently, the POCO F2 Pro has a little bit of a deal on. It's actually €579, or at least what I saw on Xiaomi's Spanish website. And they seem to be doing different European deals where it seems to be €579-ish, so slightly cheaper. But I mean, if you're willing to spend an extra €100, you may as well kind of just start looking at other options. But if you don't care about that, we have the 6GB of RAM, 128GB of model. I have no issues with this device, and this is considerably cheaper. €499 for a Snapdragon 865 device is expensive when we contrast that to the likes of the other flagship killers that we saw in other years, but it's in contrast to devices released this year. I mean, yeah, that's a good price. If, however, you find that too expensive, you can look to other devices in the market. I've seen actually mid-range devices at the moment. You can get like an Oppo A9 2020. You can get the Redmi Note 9S. All of these devices are much cheaper, but offer pretty good experiences. They're definitely worth looking at if you think that even this is too expensive, because I mean, it is a lot of money. €499 is a lot of money to drop on a phone. I can understand that. There's nothing really wrong with this device. It has NFC, it has an always-on display, it's AMOLED, 1080p, 60Hz, Snapdragon 865, 6GB of RAM, 128GB of storage. All of these are just the bare minimum of what you get. The headphone jack, pop-up camera. I know people, myself included, really like having that pop-up camera because obviously with devices that do not have a notch or a cutout or whatever, those are really nice for watching Netflix on. Currently, while I am actually reviewing a different device at the moment, so this is no longer my daily driver, when I am watching Netflix or YouTube, I actually go back to this phone because it has the nicest display out of all my phones. My OnePlus 7 Pro I scratched badly, so... But yeah, I mean, this is a good device. And if you want to check out my written review, which kind of goes in more depth of a lot of things, you can check that out in the description below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, like the video and subscribe to the channel. This has been Adam Conway with XDA TV. Thanks for watching.